All right, chapter 9, section 4, we're doing tangent ratios. So we're only working with tangent today. Again, please make sure you have your calculators because I'm going to tell you what buttons that you should be pushing so you know how to use it for your upcoming test. Trigonometric ratios. A trigonometric ratio is a ratio of the lengths of two sides in a right triangle. So, things you need to know, important things. It's a ratio of the lengths of two sides in a right triangle. It's not just anything of a right triangle, it's any two sides of a right triangle. That will be my ratio. What am I finding? Okay, when you're using your ratio, you're finding the measure of either a side, okay, any missing side, or an acute angle. One of the acute angles, because obviously the other one is a right angle because we're working with right triangles. Information that we know, there are three ratios that normally you're solving for, and I'm going to write them down. You have sine, okay, there are three ratios, sine, S-I-N-E. You have cosine, and you have tangent. Today we're just using tangent, okay? So how am I using these? How am I setting up my ratios? Maybe you guys have heard the words SOHCAHTOA before. That's what we're learning today. We're just doing the TOA part for tangent. However, you should know how you're using it and know what it means. So I have SOHCAHTOA. It's super important you guys spell this correctly because there's a setup that you have to know. So I have SOHCAHTOA. And it stands for something. It stands for the setup of your ratio. So please make sure you write this down. You're going to have sine, which is shortened as sin, equals O over H. That's my ratio. Then I have cosine equals A over H. And then I have my tangent, which is O over A. What do those O's, what do those A's, and what do those H's stand for? I'm going to write them down. Your O stands for your opposite side. Okay, your opposite side. Your H stands for your hypotenuse. And your A stands for your adjacent side. Okay, so please make sure you know SOHCAHTOA. I'm going to write it a lot of times on the notes just so you get used to it and you make sure you know how to spell it. So depends on what you're solving for. If they're asking you're solving for your angle, that's going to be sine, your angle equals, your O, H, and A are always your side measures because that's my ratio. So if you look at the top, it says your ratio is the ratio of the length of the sides. So your opposite side, your hypotenuse is a side, and then its adjacent side. Now, it depends on what they're asking you to find will be your opposite and adjacent. So once we get into the examples, it'll make more sense, but you have to know the ratios. Okay. All right, so like I said, we're just using tangent today, but this is kind of the setup for everything. All right, so looking at this one, the A for tan A, that's going to be your angle, okay? So let triangle ABC be a right triangle with an acute angle A. So angle A is acute and angle B is also acute. So looking at it, it says the tangent of angle A, written as tan A, is defined as the following. So remember, we have, again, I'm going to write it down. I have SOHCAHTOA, and yes, we're using tangent. Okay. So looking at it, tangent is going to be your opposite over your adjacent side. So tan A, that capital A, anytime you have tan or cos or sine, and some number or some letter, that's my angle. Okay, so I'm going to highlight it. This right here is your angle. It's always going to be your angle. That's always going to be my angle. So if I'm looking at this one, they're asking me to find tan A. This is my angle right here. I kind of showed you my angle in red. And now looking at it, the rule for tangent is always going to be opposite over adjacent. So if I'm looking at angle A, what's my opposite side to angle A? It's going to be that lowercase a. This side is opposite. And then my adjacent side is my B. Now, pay attention to this. If they were to ask me, okay, what's the tan of angle B? So here's angle B. What's opposite to angle B? Which side? Which side is opposite to angle B? Thank you, it's the lowercase b. Sorry, I didn't hear you. And then what's the adjacent side? It's going to be A. You guys have to remember, you have to know what's my hypotenuse. Even though, yes, C is adjacent to B, C is going to be my hypotenuse. And your hypotenuse is always opposite to your right angle. So I'm not using my C. My C is not adjacent to angle B. My C is going to be my hypotenuse. So my opposite side was B, and then my adjacent side was A, according to angle B. All right, looking at example number 1. Again, I'm just going to write SOHCAHTOA so I get used to it. Okay, and again, I'm working with tangent, and tan is opposite over adjacent. So they want me to express it as a ratio. So looking at this one, before I write anything, I'm going to label that this is my hypotenuse. And again, I'm not using my hypotenuse at all for tangents. So, solving it. The first one I have is tan R. This is angle R. Tan R as a ratio, what would my ratio be? What's my opposite side to angle R? Yes. 3, so this is my opposite side. So I'm going to have 3 over what's my adjacent side? Yeah. 8. This is now my adjacent side. All right, now I'm looking at tan angle S. What's my opposite side for tan angle S? Yeah. 8. Okay, it's going to change now that I'm looking at another angle. And what's my adjacent side for angle S? It's going to be 3. So pay attention to how it changes depending on which angle you're looking at. Keep in mind, these right here are my angles. Are you using a calculator to find tan? Most important thing when you're using your calculator, go ahead and turn it on. It must be in degrees. All right, so how can I make sure it's in degrees? Go ahead and look at your calculator. Turn it on. At the bottom right corner, it should say DEG. That stands for degrees. If it's not in degrees, 2 ways you can change it back is 1, you could reset your calculator. Honestly, if you want to reset it, that's kind of the best bet to make sure everything is cleared and in the right settings. So to reset it, you're going to push the second button, 0, and then it should say reset N or Y, and just push it to Y and click enter. The only reason why I'm telling you guys this is because if someone before you decides to change the calculator, pushes a bunch of numbers and changes it, please make sure it's in the correct setting. So again, to reset the calculator, you're going to push second. That's at the top left, that little corner in the top. 0, it's going to say reset, N or Y. Push the arrow to Y and click enter, and it's going to say memory cleared. You just reset it. Or, you see that button right next to the center? The second button, it says DRG. It's at the top, second column, the first button, DRG. Go ahead and click it, and it's going to show you the settings that it has. Degree, radians, and just make sure it's in degrees. Okay? So make sure it's in degrees before we start. If it's not in degrees, your answers will be wrong. All of your answers will be completely wrong. Yes?
To make sure it's in degrees, you put enter right?
You what?
If you press enter on it?
Yeah. When it's under degrees, yes. Yeah. Go ahead and click enter. So again, you should see that DEG on your calculator on the screen at the bottom right. Do y'all see that? Okay. Now, we're going to be using our calculators to find these tangents. The first two are pretty easy. Keep in mind, I'm solving for an angle. But C and D, I'm solving... Okay, let me rephrase that. A and B, I'm getting the answer from an angle. C and D, I'm solving for my angle. So there's a little bit of a different way to solve for those. So looking at A, how am I typing it into the calculator? I'm going to write it out for you. So looking at A, plugging it into my calculator, you're going to push tan, then you're going to type 45, then you're going to push the enter button, which is also your equal button. Okay, so how should it look on the screen? It should look like tan, open parentheses, 45. You could close it and push enter or just push enter. So tan 45, I'm doing it with you as well. What's the answer for tan 45? Yes. 1. Go ahead and write it in. Go ahead and try the second one on your own. And then I'm going to write what you should enter. All right, what did you get for tan 36? Round to the nearest, we'll do 100th. Yeah, what'd you get?
727.
Say it one more time.
727. 0.727.
Okay, give me to the nearest 100th.
73.
Good, 0.73. Okay. Now, looking at the next questions, I'm now solving for the angle. Okay, this is a little different, so please pay attention to this. I'm solving for my angle. When you are solving for the angle, you're using the inverse. You're using that -1, the inverse. Okay, so on your calculators, do you see those sine -1, cosine -1, tan -1 right above the button? It's on the physical calculator. That's what we're going to use. So pay attention to how I'm typing this into the calculator, and yes, I'm going to write it out. You're first going to push the second button. Then you're going to push the tan button. Then you're going to type in your number, 2.4751, and then click enter. So what should it look like on my calculator? Tan -1 with an open parentheses, 2.4751, and then you could click enter. Does anybody have any trouble where to get the inverse? Do I need to explain it again? Once you push enter, who could tell me what is my angle? Gabriel?
68.
Perfect. Your answer is going to be 68 degrees. And then the second one, go ahead and try it on your own. right, what did you get for your angle for this one? Good, 39 degrees. All right, again, when you are solving for your angles, you guys have to use that -1. Okay, super important that you guys remember that. So please do not forget that. And keep in mind, these right here are your angle measures. So I'm just gonna label that. These are your angles. All right, any questions on how to use the calculator right now? Okay. All right, the next slide, it says use tan to complete a triangle. Looking at this example, again, I'm just gonna write my SOHCAHTOA. And I'm using tangent, and we know that tan is opposite over adjacent. I'm gonna go ahead and label my hypotenuse. And again, that does not change. Your hypotenuse stays your hypotenuse. So they want me to find tan angle A. Looking at tan angle A, what's my opposite side for tan angle A? What is it?
2.
It's my 2. This is my opposite side. And then what's my adjacent side? 7. This is my adjacent side for my purple. And then I'm going to go ahead and they want me to find tan B. What's my opposite side for angle B? Good. This is now my opposite side. And then what's my adjacent side? 2. Yes.
Would there be a case where we have to, where it be tan, like C?
No. Because the angle's already given to you. It's the 90 degrees.
Okay.
I would never be looking for C. It's only one of the acute angles. It's always going to be one of the acute angles. All right, so now looking at it, they want me to solve for my angle. So what's the most important thing when I'm solving for my angle? What do I have to use? When you're solving for an angle, what do I have to use? Yeah. The -1. I have to use the inverse. So they want me to solve for my angle. Again, you have to use the inverse. Do not forget that. So for these two, I have to use tan -1. I have to use the inverse. So looking at this, I'm going to go ahead and solve for angle A first. So that's going to be my next question. So I'm plugging it into the calculator. My inverse of tan, open parentheses, what's the ratio that I have to plug in? Good. So it's going to be 2/7. If you're wondering how to get that fraction, it's just 2 divided by 7, and it's going to pop up like this. So this is what it should look like in your calculator. So second tan, 2 divided by 7, round to the nearest 10th. What would my answer be?
16.
10th. 15.9. Okay, before you solve for angle B, going back to previous lessons, what is the measure of my 2 acute angles of a right triangle?
45, 45.
Well, it's only if they're giving me a 45, but what do my 2 acute angles equal? They have to equal something. They have to equal 90 degrees, okay? A triangle equals 180 degrees. So if they're already giving me 90 out of that 180, this has to equal 90 degrees. So if I know that this angle equals 15.9, how can I solve for angle B? I could just subtract 90, okay? So a couple ways you could solve D. One way is you can do 90 minus that 15.9, or yes, you can plug it into the calculator. The inverse of tan times 7/2, and you're still going to get the same answer. But again, you need to understand, to save yourself some time, that these 2 angles right here are going to be 90 degrees. They're equaling to 90 degrees. So if you subtracted correctly, what did you get? Jonah? 74.1. But yes, if you went ahead and you plugged it into the calculator, 7 over 2, rounding to the nearest tenth, it would give you still 74.1. Do we all understand that? That's just a quick way to solve it. Okay, the two acute angles right here of a right triangle are going to equal 90 degrees when you add them. All right, looking at example number 4, it says, complete the triangle. I'm going to have my SOHCAHTOA. And again, we're only using tangent. Do I have enough information to use tangent? No, I do not. Do I have enough information to solve for my missing leg? Yes. Using what? What is it? Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so yes, I still need to use my hypotenuse for that, but we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. And what's the Pythagorean theorem? Equals c squared. Good. So what am I plugging in? So I have my A. This is considered my B, and this is my hypotenuse always. It's opposite of my right angle, so I'm going to do 8 squared plus x squared equals 17 squared. Solving for x, I'm going to have 64 plus x squared equals 289. Subtract 64 from both sides. X squared equals 225. And getting rid of my squared, I'm square rooting. X equals 15 as a whole. So that's the first thing that you should have done, was solve for your missing side. Now I can go ahead and solve for my angles. Again, what's the most important thing when solving for my angles? What do I have to use? I have to use the inverse. Okay, that -1. So solving for the measure of angle A, which is right here, I have tan A equals, what's my opposite side for angle A? 8. And what's my adjacent side? 15. So plugging it into your calculator again, you have to use that tan -1, open parentheses, 8 over 15. And what would you get for the measure of angle 1? Or measure of angle A equals what? 28 degrees. How can I solve for the measure of angle B? How do I solve for the measure of angle B? Good, I could subtract by 90. For sure I can. So the measure of angle B, you could do it 2 ways, and I'm going to write both ways. Yes, 90 minus 28, that's going to give me 62. Or I can definitely plug it in. Measure of angle A, I'm going to use tan B is equal to 15 over 8. I'm solving for my angle, so I'm going to use my inverse. And then that's still going to give me the same answer. Measure of angle B is going to equal 62 degrees. So you will always be told on your test homework, I want to say that it's going to be nearest 10th, but depending on what they tell you in the directions, sometimes it can be 100th, but most likely it's going to be 10th for the homework.
Because right now you're rounding to the nearest whole number.
For my angles, yes, I did whole number, but for the previous one, I did 10th. But you guys, you should know how to round. I'm just making sure you guys know how to round to tenths and hundredths. But for these, I did whole number. But yes, you will be told what to round to on your test. Looking at this, it says find the value of x to the nearest tenth. So again, SOHCAHTOA. Are they giving me my hypotenuse to use? No, they are not. So I know I'm not using sine. I know I'm not using cosine. Again, here's my hypotenuse. And they're giving me my angle. Looking at this angle, I have 24. So right now I have tan 24 equals what over what? Good. X over 20. This is my opposite side. This is my adjacent side. How do I solve for x? How do I get x by itself? What do I have to do to both sides? Good, I'm multiplying 20 on both sides. That's going to get rid of it. Plugging this into the calculator, you're going to have 20 times, I think a dot normally opens up for that, or like a star. 20 times tan 24, and that's going to give you your answer. What would I get if I multiply 20 times tan 24, rounding to the nearest tenth? What was that? 8.9 would be my answer. X equals 8.9. Okay, so if you're solving for an x, if it's your numerator, you're going to multiply by your denominator. If x is my numerator, multiplying by my denominator. All right, special right triangles. Use a special right triangle to find the tangent of 60-degree angle. Please pay attention to these. You are required to write your answers as simplified radicals. Okay, you have to simplify your radicals. Please do not give me these answers as decimals. If you do, it's going to be wrong. So, using special right triangles, please pay attention to this. Here is my right triangle. I have 60. I have 30. How did we learn these? What do we know? This is A. This is A radical 3. And this is 2A. When I'm using my trigonometric ratios, I'm using the values of the sides. I'm not worrying about my A. So this is going to be 1. This is 2. And this is the square root of 3. Okay, just get rid of your A's. Don't worry about them. So if they want me to solve for tan 60, what's opposite of 60? Radical 3. And what's adjacent to 60? 1. So what would my answer be for this? It's just the square root of 3. So tan 60 equals the square root of 3. However, if you plug this into your calculator, tan 60, go ahead and plug it in and see what you get. You're going to get a decimal. Okay, you're going to get a decimal. 1.73205 dot, 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 dot. It's going to go on. If you give that to me as your answer, it's going to be marked wrong. Please do not give it to me as a decimal. If you see that they're asking you for a special right triangle, label the sides and solve. You cannot give it to me as a decimal. So let me give you another example. If they say solve for tan 45, here's my special right triangle. This is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And again, what do we have before? We had A radical 2. But I'm using the values 1, 1, and the square root of 2. I have tan 45. My opposite and adjacent side are both 1. So I'm just going to get 1 as my answer. Try plugging it into the calculator. If you plug it into the calculator, tan 45 does equal 1. Okay, so yes, that one is a whole number. And giving you one more example. Let's say I have tan 30. Okay, tan 30. Again, drawing my triangle. I have my 30, 60, 90 triangle. And I'm just going to write what we need to know. This is 1, 2, the square root of 3. Looking at tan 30. What's opposite to angle 30? 1. And what's adjacent to angle 30? Square root of 3. Can I have a square root as my denominator? No. So I need to multiply. Oops, not 2. That should be 3. And my answer for tan 30. Again, do not plug that into the calculator. You're going to have the square root of 3 over 3 as your answer. So please, for special right triangles, do not just plug them into the calculator. You have to solve them. Again, you are expected to simplify your radicals. So this is in simplest radical form. Do not plug it into your calculator because it will give you a decimal and it will be marked wrong. Okay, on your homework, the last, I think, 3 questions are practice. Okay, so please make sure you guys practice those. Do you have any questions on these? For example, number 6, special right triangles. All right, 2 things we're going to cover, angle of elevation and angle of depression. This is elevation. The angle that an upward line of sight makes with a horizontal line. Think of it as if I'm standing on something and looking up, that's my angle of elevation. Elevation goes up. Depression goes down, okay? So angle of elevation going up. So with that being said, looking at the next question, you are measuring the height of a spruce tree. You stand 45 feet from the base of the tree. Then you measure the angle elevation from the ground to the top of the tree to be 59 degrees. Find the height h of the tree to the nearest foot. So, looking at this question, again, I'm going to write my SOHCAHTOA to see which one I'm using. They're not giving me my hypotenuse, so I'm not using sine, I'm not using cosine, I'm going to use tangent. Are they giving me my angle? Yes, my angle is 59, which is right here. So right now I have tan 59 equals, what's the opposite side to 59? H. Good. What's my adjacent side to 59? Good, 45. So how am I solving for h? What do I have to do to both sides? Multiply by 45 on both sides. Good. Multiply that side. Multiply this side. Go ahead and plug it into your calculator. And round to the nearest whole number. It says round or find the height h of the tree to the nearest foot. So what would the height of my tree be? Yeah, good, 75 feet. Questions on this one? Okay.